on A Lolly Life, we are going to talk about some benefits of cooking with your kids while we make some lemon bars, because I love lemon bars. First, before we get started, I'm going to wear an apron, and we're going to make sure our hair is pulled up so that you don't get hair in your food, and I did just recently wash my hands. The recipe that we are using is a little hand-scribbled recipe that I got from my sister-in-law, Jennie. She makes some really wonderful lemon bars, and so one year at Christmas I decided I wanted to make some lemon bars too, and I made some lemon bars. They weren't so good. And I tried a different recipe, and I was like, this isn't as good as Jennie's either. And I tried a third recipe, and I'm like, seriously, what is my problem? Just call her, for heaven's sakes, or text her. I'm pretty sure she'll give you the recipe. And she did. Scribbled it down. I love it. The first thing that we need to do this recipe is wash the lemons, because we need to zest them. And zesting lemons just basically means grating the outer layer of a lemon. Now, I happen to have a fancy smancy zester. You don't need this. You can use a cheese grater, maybe on the smaller part of the cheese grater. I guess I love lemon bars enough that it was worth my the little bit of kitchen space that I have to have a zester. The first reason that you should cook with your kids is because it's a life skill. Your job as a parent is to teach your kids to be independent adults. So that actually means to be an independent adult requires some basic cooking skills. They don't have to be fancy or even company-worthy cooking skills, but they have to be something. Independent adults are adults that contribute to society in some way, and adults that have the skills to take care of themselves. That would include cooking, because as far as I know, whether you like it or not, you need to eat multiple times every day. For most people, cooking is not something that they just like naturally know how to do. You actually have to learn how to do it. Some people have the desire to figure out how to do that on their own, but most don't. They actually require a parent helping them, which is one of our things. A role as a parent is to help teach our kids to be independent, not to do it for them. Even if it's easier, because I know that it's easier to not, to like plant your kid in front of the TV or computer or something while you get dinner ready. That's easier, but it's not necessarily what our job as parents is either. The second reason why you should cook with your kids is because it teaches them to be thankful. There is nothing like having to make a meal yourself and put in all that hard work that makes you realize how much work somebody else put in when you eat their meal. Anything that you make kids do on their own helps them to start appreciating all the things that moms do for them. When you zest a lemon, you only take off the top layer. You don't really get the white stuff. And so you can kind of see how I took off the outside layer, zested that up, but the white stuff is still there. And with my fancy smancy zester, that is what lemon zest looks like. I will tell you that if you try and do this with a cheese grater or something like that that's not a fancy smancy lemon zester, you will not get nearly as much. This is actually probably too much. It calls for the zest from 2 lemons. I personally think it needs the zest from 1 lemon if you are using a zester. The next thing that we need to do is we need to juice our lemons. You can do this by hand. You don't have to have a lemon juicer. Like I said, I really love lemon kind of things, and so we have a juicer, but you can cut it in half and just squeeze each half and do the best you can of squeezing it out, and it will work. I don't necessarily consider the lemon bars recipe a beginner recipe, but it's only because it requires fancy tools, and it's a little bit harder if you don't have those fancy tools. Okay, so the third reason that you should cook with your kids is kind of related to the second reason. Now, the second was, so that they would be thankful. It really helps them to be thankful. But the third reason is it helps teach them empathy. It helps them realize when they have put the effort into making something and they want to have done well, and they start to realize that when they make those rude comments about your food, that kind of hurts somebody's feelings. And so I wouldn't necessarily recommend making a rude comment about their food, but it is a discussion that you could have with your child. You could talk to them and say, how would you feel if you put all this time and effort into making this, and then somebody walked in the room and they're like, oh my goodness, why? Or they started gagging. 2 zested and squeezed lemons. The fourth reason that you should cook with your children is because it fosters a closer relationship. Just like I was saying how you could talk to them about empathy after they've made something, and say, how do you think it would make you feel if somebody did this? How would it make you feel if somebody came in and they ate one of your cookies and they were like, oh my goodness, this is the best cookie I have ever eaten? But those conversations that you can have while you're cooking are actually really important. And the interesting thing is that when you're doing something and you're busy, I don't know, zesting a lemon or chopping up vegetables or whatever, you don't have to follow the same social protocols that you might in normal situations because you're doing something. And so obviously if you're chopping up vegetables, it is okay that you look at the cutting board while you're doing it so you don't cut your finger. So it makes it okay. You don't have to necessarily keep eye contact or other things. And sometimes, for some people, it makes it easier for them to talk about something that might be on their mind or that they might not necessarily bring up. And so it's especially good if you have a child that is really closed-lipped and doesn't necessarily talk about their day. To have those opportunities to be working on something together gives them those opportunities to talk to you. Even though I took care of the lemon stuff first, it isn't actually the first thing that we work on. We work on the crust first, but I like to get this step out of the way. Here's a little kitchen tip, and that is some of the fancy schmancy tools. I don't know why I like that word, or those words. That's okay. I like rhyming words. When you have some of these tools, they don't necessarily do super well in the dishwasher. Now, sometimes they'll say you can dishwash it and sometimes they won't. They don't do super well in the dishwasher. And so you have to hand wash them. I will tell you that it is immensely easier, like so much easier, and you should take them and rinse them off and wash them or whatever else you need to do immediately. Do not let the stuff dry on it. It will make it so much harder. It will start doling the blades. It will, whatever. It just makes it so much harder. So if you have some of these tools, like a zester or a fancy apple peeler or garlic press or something like that, clean them immediately. And yes, that is like a 10-word sentence, that one word. Okay, something else. This was actually number 6, but we're on number 5, and so I'm gonna like do them out of order. So number 6, that is number 5. Reason that you should cook with your kids is because it helps reinforce things that they're learning at school. When you have to read and follow a recipe, especially one that is like written, can you see how this is like like it's not necessarily, yeah. When you have to read and follow directions in order to have what you're doing turn out, and it like, there's an immediate result, and you know when you taste it whether you succeeded or whether you failed, it inspires more action on the child's part. And so then when in school, when you are working on math or English or whatever else, and those thoughts come to your mind of, am I ever going to use this in real life? Because you know that they do. The answer will be yes, and they'll know that. Fractions are not easy to learn. Just, you know, they're just not. But if you have a child who has spent some time cooking in the kitchen, and they have to work with 1/4 of a cup and 1/3 of a cup and 1 cup and a 1/2 cup and all these different things, and the recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup, and they have to figure out, well, I don't have a 3/4 of a cup. How do I get there? Well, I can either do 3 of 1/4 of a cup, or I can do 1 of these and 1 of these, or, you know, there's like, but that kind of math, even if you're there helping them through it, and it's really difficult for them, when they start learning those skills in school, they realize the importance of them because they've used them before in real life. And so when they're learning math problems that say, you know, that are reading or other things, they realize that there's an actual application to the things that they are learning in school. Cooking is really one of the best ways that you can show tangible results for what they're learning in school and why it would be important to learn those things in school. It starts teaching things like chemistry too. Like, it's not just math and reading, but when you see what you're doing and you realize that adding heat to something changes the consistency of it, that starts teaching chemistry. And so then when they get to chemistry and they start taking those classes, they have some like background knowledge in how to do those things. The first thing it says, in a large mixing bowl, cream together butter and 1/2 cup powdered sugar. And when it says cream, that just means that you mix it until they're really mixed together. For this, I am going to use my stand mixer, but you can do this, absolutely can do this by hand. It just takes a little bit more time. So in this recipe, it says cream together the butter and 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Well, it tells you exactly how much the powdered sugar you're supposed to put in, but it doesn't tell you how much butter. You actually have to go to the other side of the recipe to find out how much butter to put in because, well, I just scribbled it down and didn't really care. They have to use some problem-solving skills to figure out, well, it says to add the butter, how much do I add? They have to go find it. These are, you know, story problems and question and answers, and how do you figure those things out? So we're gonna add our butter. It says 1/2 cup of butter. 1/2 cup of butter and 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Mine's extra squeaky. Do you see how that looks creamy? That is what they mean by cream the butter and the sugar. It's all mixed together, very creamy. And yes, I absolutely love this aftermarket little blade for my KitchenAid mixer because it scrapes the sides at the same time as it mixes. The next thing that the recipe asks us to do is to mix in the flour and the baking powder. This is baking powder, not to be confused with baking soda. I say this because, well, obviously, I've confused it before. They do similar things. They have slightly different tastes. Some people can notice the taste, some people can't. I think that you have to add different amounts. Like, it's not like a straight, if you add 1/4 of a tablespoon of this, then you would add 1/4 of a tablespoon of that. I don't actually know, but they are not the same thing. It does affect how it turns out. So, baking powder. It has a fancy little thing there on the can. That's to help you scrape it so that you get a level scoop without having to use anything extra. And it calls for 1 cup flour. You can use a knife to do this. I sometimes will take my finger and just slide it across the top. When you are adding flour to a mixer, or you're mixing it in any way whatsoever, you should always make sure that you start on low, or you will get it everywhere. Sometimes I get it everywhere anyway, but yeah, the flour, and start on the squeaky setting. Well, hey, didn't squeak this time. Woohoo! Start on low. Once it mixes in a little bit, then you can move on to a higher setting. But if you start on a high setting, it actually will spray flour everywhere. So the 6th reason, which is kind of the 5th reason, but we switched them around. The 6th reason that you should cook with your children is because it boosts confidence. When they have had the chance to make something and do something, and they know that I know how to make macaroni and cheese, or I know how to boil eggs, or I know how to fry an egg on, or make toast, or make cookies, make lemon bars, whatever. When they know how to do those kinds of things, it boosts their confidence. When they get to say, I made this myself. That's just awesome. Like, it's just an awesome feeling, and you want to give that to your children. What is confidence? Freedom from doubt, believing in your abilities, knowing that you can do something. And this is kind of an interesting little thing. Up here, at the very top, in the very first part of the directions, well, it says preheat the oven to 350, and then it says spray a 9x13 baking dish. It's really easy to skip those parts of the directions, and they make a big difference later on. The recipe says that the mixture will resemble a fluffy cookie dough, which I think it does. And it's kind of like a crumbly Play-Doh of sorts. And then it says press evenly into baking dish. Now, because our hands are clean, we can use our hands to press this into the baking dish. The 7th reason that you should cook with your kids is because it encourages kids to try new things when they're eating. Now, this is just like Amy philosophy. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with reality, but I think that when kids cook, that they, I don't know, maybe it like deadens their taste buds or prepares their taste buds to like the food or something, but it is a real thing. I don't know why it happens. That's my Amy philosophy as to why it happens, but I don't know why it happens. What I do know is that kids are so much more likely to taste or try something if they helped make it. That's something that little kids could certainly help you with. Spreading it out. Like, it's a tactile kind of thing, and perfect for really little kids. When you set a timer for things that are in the oven, always set it for slightly under the amount of time that they ask for, or the lowest amount of time that they ask for, unless you're really familiar with it. Because every oven bakes a little bit differently, it's so much easier to add an extra minute or two to your timer than it is to burn it, because that happens. Or have it slightly overbaked and be dry and crumbly or weird. Slightly less time. And now it's time to move on to making the filling, and in order to do that, we'll need a clean mixing bowl. So I'm going to rinse those off, or wash these out real quick. The next step is the filling, and it says in a large mixing bowl, whisk the eggs. Now, as much as I love this, it doesn't whisk. This is a whisk. You can do this part by hand again. You just need a whisk and a lot more time, but you can do it by hand. The 8th reason that you should cook with your kids is because it promotes healthier eating habits. What you're eating at home is almost always healthier than what you eat when you are eating out. Next, it tells us to mix in the flour, sugar, and salt. 4 tablespoons of flour and 2 cups of sugar and 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. When kids know what is actually the real ingredients inside their food, they're able to make better, healthier eating choices. When they make cookies, they actually would hopefully recognize all of the ingredients in cookies. They would recognize the flour, they would recognize the sugar, the baking powder, the baking soda, those kinds of things. And so when they look at a package of cookies, at the ingredients on it, and they start seeing things that they can't even pronounce, then it's kind of this eye-opening thing where they're like, okay, that probably isn't healthy for me if I can't even pronounce it, I've never heard of it, and I don't actually bake with it. The 9th reason why you should cook with your kids is because it inspires family dinners. I know that family dinners are hard in today's society. However, family dinners bond like few other things will. They just bond the family unit together. And that family unit is really the basic unit of society. If our families don't bond together and we don't have that strong family bond, turn that off so we can talk. And we don't have that strong family bond, then society starts falling apart. And I don't probably have to tell you all the ways that society right now is kind of falling apart. And so family dinners have to be a priority. We have to do things to bond with our families. Unless, of course, you're willing. It's like it's browned on the edges. Unless, of course, you're willing to live through the zombie apocalypse, then family dinners, they're optional. The 10th reason why you should really cook with your kids is because it's helpful for the family. To truly be part of something, you have to contribute to it. And so if you never ask your kids to help cook or do chores or anything like that, they're not contributing to it. And when they don't do that, the bond doesn't form the same way. Don't take that away from your kids. Ask them to do things. Have them be responsible for, if you have a teenager, have them be responsible for making dinner on the nights that you come home late, even if it's just boxed macaroni and cheese. They want to feel needed. They really do. Even if they complain about it, they just do that because it's new. But everybody wants to be needed. Our next step is pouring our mixture into the crust. "25 minutes. One aspect of cooking that some people seem to just kind of brush past, they're like, if you made the thing and whatever it was that you're making and it turned out well, then ta-da, you're all done. Well, that's not true. The truth is, when you're done, you're only about halfway done, because somebody has to clean all this stuff up. Just kidding. That only took less than 5 minutes. It really isn't that hard to clean up, but it makes a huge difference. It finished baking, and I set it on a cold cement floor so it cooled off quickly, and so it's all done. Now we have one thing left, and that is we need to sprinkle it with some powdered sugar. And to sprinkle it with powdered sugar, you need some kind of a colander, like a metal colander of sorts. So we will put a little bit of powdered sugar in our metal colander, and I have it on a plate so that I don't get it all over the counter. And we just want to lightly sprinkle it. You kind of just hit the colander and it sprinkles it on. And it's a sifter, it's not a colander, but yeah. Now you may be wondering about the odd lighting right now. The power went out, but I decided I really needed to finish this video and I really needed to show you what it looked like when it got all the powdered sugar on it, because I want to eat one of these and I'm not waiting for the power to come back on to do it. So we're done, I get to eat one. So we'll see you next time on A Lolly Life. I want to eat a cookie. Okay. Oh yeah. Victory. It's only slightly misshapen. Now then. Makes me want to do a happy dance. Now that is lemony goodness.